If you don't keep using your brains, by the way, the computer's going to take your jobs. So you've got to be the
Yeah, that's
difference
gonna
between
happen.
Python machines. Yes,
So
it's not going to happen that way, but you need to play your role. All right.
yes, people need to learn again. I think it's the lost art of critical thinking. You know, it's just in the type 1 space, for example, and I don't think this is that difficult, right? But if you have a young adolescent male whose hemoglobin A1C 6.2 and his BMI is in the normal range, why isn't your head spinning to go get the autoantibodies and fasting C peptides on that kid? I don't need to be an endocrinologist to do that. It just phenotypically, he is a type 1 diabetic and he is dysglycemic. He could be stage 2. And until I have the
Mhm.
C peptides and the autoantibodies, I don't know. But I want to check that box off before he goes into decay. Because a little bit of knowledge tells you that if he's a type 2, then he'll likely never have decay. Not impossible, but most likely not. So it's a different follow up that you're going to do. How do we use the EHR to educate 30,000 clinicians about these changes that can have real effects on not only population health, but the outcomes of your patients?
Chip referred to it earlier, and we talked about it earlier. It really comes down to how we design care plans, or what I would call action plans, because we pediatricians are all used to using an asthma action plan. But as we structure the EHR, if it is to be a truly electronic health manager, then we are creating opportunities within the care plan, within the note, and AI is going to help with this, to nudge clinicians and help them to be thinking about those other possibilities. I would take your challenge wholeheartedly, Herb, that we need to be the educator. We need to be able to provide those resources, those clinical guidelines, etc., to nudge clinicians, essentially. Come out of your seeing 25 URIs that day and think about this specific patient.
Thoughts, Chet?
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I'd only add, I would love it if the pediatricians who are in fact taking care of these kids were the drivers behind the development of those care plans. I would trust Dan Feitan's worldview of how to create a care plan for a kid with T1D over a committee's version of it. A committee made up of people who only see these kids in their academic settings. And these people are going to be mad at me. I'm not saying they're not smart. I'm not saying they're not capable, but I have been invited in as the EHR guy to so many meetings after committees have met for 2 years to define XYZ. You come in and you're like, what? Did you not talk to anyone in this business? That the form you've designed, this magic form that's going to take care of everything. Dan knows this, and George knows, the New York State school form. Like, what maniacs created that? Because it's a form literally designed not to be completed by a computer. It is the logic of the form doesn't work. The layout of the form doesn't work. And if you just had one developer in there, one designer in there, you'd be like, you can't, wait, you want people to actually use this? And same thing. I want the definition of these care plans. I want the definition of the protocols to be rooted in pragmatism and utility, and not I don't mind picturing the golden space of what's possible. Like, I want the coolest, but that is not what we roll out on day one. We just get people to put in the diagnosis coach. like we'd get the get the SNOMED codes in there. And at the very least, because Herb, you've said this to me, if this crew right here, if we could wave a magic wand and say, hey, guess what? A1C is now going to be done at whatever our ages, we're doing these other blood draws. And that'd be awesome. And we would find some kids and keep some kids out of the hospital and keep some kids from dying. That's a fact. It's just a matter of, like, how much overhead do we have to accept to do that? However, if we were just going to accept a minimum standard, which is if a kid gets type 1 diabetes, that kid's siblings get screened. Okay, which doesn't happen right now. That is not that I should actually, Dan, that's something you and I could go check. How many kids get a T1D? The first kid in the family to get T1D, because you mentioned this right at the beginning of our podcast. How many of these kids go get T1D, and how many of those other kids get checked? And that number is not 99%. All right. I bet that number is like 60%. All right. I'm guessing, but let's just get some standard things that say, go test these kids now. Let's cross that bridge first, and then I'll be excited.